Okay.
Pretending to be professional now, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Hello. Hello, everyone. Hopefully this is live. We have no clue. We think we're live now.
Yeah, we're pretty sure we're live.
My name is Stephen Aryan, and joining me this evening is Krystle Matar. We were going to be having a third guest with us, Faye from Books and Chocaholic, but unfortunately there's a bad storm in the UK and it's knocking out power in some places. Her power keeps coming off and on and off and on. So she's gutted she can't join us. She may appear in the chat, in which case we'll put up some of her comments if we can. So we're going to talk as best as we can about Stone and Farewell. I was looking forward to hearing her opinion because she hasn't read the series before.
Yeah.
And that's quite a different thing.
She was quite active in the chat last time too, so I wasn't surprised when you said she wanted to join us, but it's too bad about the weather.
Yeah, it would have been good to hear her thoughts on the book. So we're going to do our best to talk about it as well as we can, and we may end up cutting this short and just talking about something else, writing, publishing, being an author, that stuff. Anyway, for now, we're talking about Stone of Farewell, Book 2 in Memory, Sorrow and Thorn by Tad Williams. And this is the first time I've reread this in about 25 years.
Oh, wow.
Which is aging me slightly, but it's my birthday tomorrow. I'm not saying how old I am. But I'm not as old as Fletcher, so that's okay.
You're not as old as Fletcher. No one's as old as Fletcher. He is like the bones of the ancient earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why he writes about necromancy so much, because like he's just telling his own secrets a bit.
He's getting closer and closer to the grave and he wants to resurrect himself. Sure. Yeah, fine. Okay.
He already has a few times, that's my guess.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. We're sorry you can't be with us. Hi. It's like power outage and stuff, but you're here in spirit at least. So yeah, okay. So if you have read the book, post comments, thoughts, in the chat, and we will do our best to include them in our discussion this evening. But so to remind everyone and myself, the Dragonbone chair. So spoilers, by the way, if you haven't read the first book or the second book, there will be spoilers for both books. Book 1 ends with them finally going to the far north, climbing the mountain. They get to the cave and they find Thorn. And during the process, they wake up an ice dragon that attacks them.
Oh, yeah.
And Simon manages to hit it a few times with Thorn, of all things, which... I'd forgotten how weird the sword is. Like, I know all the swords are a little bit different, but this one is like, sometimes it's really light as a feather, sometimes it's really heavy. It seems to have a mind of its own. And some other people can barely lift it. And it's just like this weird, I think it's star metal or something.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And I always find these discussions so interesting because I kind of forget how much I remember until somebody says something. And I'm like, oh yeah, that part. That was really cool. And I remember just kind of like it becomes like, I don't know, almost an analogy for heroicism in that, in theory, it carries, everybody carries it so differently. In that maybe they're kind of unwilling to carry it and it resists them.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like it almost has a mind of its own. It isn't conscious. Yeah. It doesn't have a voice or eyes or anything, but there's something there in it, some kind of spirit that moves it, that those who just want to kill people with it, it almost seems reluctant.
Yeah.
But Simon's quite naive. He's quite gullible. He's quite, annoying at times, but he's defending his friends in the best possible way at that moment, and the sword becomes light as a feather.
Yeah, less annoying in the second book, though, if I remember correctly. I think he like Simon is such an interesting character, the way he grows across the series, quite literally, because those third books, he's got the old beard and like he just looks so adult, like it looks like a different character. So I think remembering back, like that was the most fun for me, because in the fantasy that I was reading at the time, i.e. David Gemmell, we didn't see that as much because he all of his books stood alone. So we only got like flash, like if there was a character arc for specific characters that came across multiple books. It was only pieces of it rather than a continuous arc like Tad does. And I remember being really moved by this poor child who is really forced to grow up. And it was written really well, really compellingly, especially as a teenager at the time, where I was just like, yeah, hopefully I do half as good for myself, or half as bad. I don't know. It's arguable.
It's something I've been thinking about more recently. And before I started writing The Coward, probably people don't really know this, but originally it was going to be a trilogy. And what I wanted to do was do a trilogy of books about the 3 stages of a young man going through his life. And because you have the mythical with women, it's maiden, mother, and crone. And there isn't technically an equivalent for men, like the 3. You can pick phrases, but there isn't the kind of thing, because that comes from mythology and folklore, and there isn't
grounded in.
So I wanted to do something similar to that originally with that trilogy, and it ended up being a duology for various complicated reasons. But it isn't until I've started rereading this, started rereading this, I've realized basically that's what Tad has already done in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, where in the first book he is annoying, cocky, ignorant, so naive, and he's just this kitchen boy. And then he starts to grow and he becomes more responsible, and then he starts changing and evolving, and he gets the beard and the scar. And that's when I thought, Tad's already done it. And 25 years ago. 30 years ago.
In the chat, Simon is the predecessor of both Fitz and Aragon, and no one can convince me otherwise. And I think she's bang on. Like, it just it just has like this a study in becoming across a great strife that I think it definitely set a tone for fantasy at the time. And I can't necessarily think of as much before that wasn't about grown men already. Whereas, although maybe that just could be my lack of reading before Gamal. But otherwise,
it's funny because with Legend, with Gamel, we start with Druss as an old man. It isn't until later that book was so successful he went back into the books. But even then, they're just snapshots.
But even then, Druss was always an old man. Yeah, he starts as at least fully
60.
Like the furthest back is the First Chronicles of Druss the Legend. Now we've hijacked this. We're not talking about Tad Williams anymore.
It's related. It's related.
But the First Chronicles of Druss the Legend, he's gone to save his wife.
He's in his 20s at that point, because he's already been a farmer for a number of years, and he's working.
Exactly. Yeah, so even then he's still a man, versus Tad Williams starts with very literally a child. And it's interesting, and I find it is such an interesting thing in the genre, where arguably the children are the ones that are most deeply impacted by these things that happen around them, that they can't necessarily choose or understand in a way that I think us old people can't. It's a different kind of trauma when you're that young.
I was thinking about the C.S. Lewis books as well, and like Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe. This is now looking back. The other thing that is so odd is that they keep going back through the wardrobe and doing more stuff, and yet they're never traumatized by all the things that they've gone through, which seems ridiculous. Think about it. Whereas if I was writing it now, I'd be like, the reason, the whole point for, probably can't remember, the whole point they go to the countryside is that it's World War II, and they send children in England to the countryside, away from the cities,
so they weren't being bombed. Exactly.
So they're not having these traumas, and yet they go through this horrendous thing, and then they win, but they come back home, and I'm like, you've basically just gone through your own kind of version of PTSD and been affected by this terrible ordeal without being involved in the war. So it's kind of reflected on that.
It's an interesting difference between Lewis and Tolkien specifically, because Tolkien really wanted to talk about that clearly, with Frodo being so completely changed by his trauma that he couldn't even go home anymore, even though his home was right there waiting for him. And then I think Tad is wanting to have the same conversation where children who are forced to grow through incredible circumstances have to outgrow their own limitations in a way that must be really painful, but also really, really inspiring and interesting. And it's like a shame that he has to be so resilient.
Yeah. So when we get to Stone and Fab, when we get to the second book, he's gone through that first kind of, well, it's beginning with the whole of the first book is a terrible trauma for him. It's a massive ordeal of escaping the hayholt, being underground, running through the thing, going through the snow, the endless snow, finally getting to the north, and finally getting the sword, and then he has attacked by a dragon. So it's like it's one thing after another, and he's absolutely he's still a little bit annoying in Stone of Farewell. He's still a little bit whiny, and he's still a little bit a kid, but far less so, for sure.
But also, I feel like I too would be extremely whiny under similar circumstances, and I think that's an interesting thing to remember as readers and writers. Where it's like, yes, the whining is annoying, but also, yeah, me too. I feel you, buddy. I would be pretty
You'd fall
upset
back.
too.
Like if you suddenly get some comfort again after having gone through all this trauma, he's got no one to complain to, and then suddenly he's got Binnabic, and then he's got friends again. He starts to feel a little bit more comfortable, and then it's like, oh yeah, I'm kind of missing my bed. He says this a few times, like, I just want to be warm. I just want to have a bed. I just want to feel comfort again. And so, I know when people go through things, any kind of dangerous or any kind of uncomfortable or difficult trauma, they are affected, but they don't. Not every aspect of their entire life is completely changed 100%. Some things snap back. They just kind of, because it's ingrained in you.
Yeah.
His need for comfort being one, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, well, also the friends are the comfort, and in having those friends, it's a reminder of all the other things that are now gone and he has to cope with. And so, it's complicated.
Yes, and Simon's starting to have a found family again, because even though when he was back in the hayholt, he had Dr. Morgens as this kind of surrogate father. He had Rachel the dragon as this awful kind of stepmom, essentially. He had all his brothers and sisters, and then suddenly they're all stripped away from him. And then he starts to get pieces back with Sluddig and some of the other people who are around him as kind of uncles and friends and stepfathers and stuff like that. So definitely found family again comes back in.
But then surely you have to reckon with the differences of that family and what you left behind, while also trudging forward, because the drama's not over yet. You still got 4 books to get through, kid. There's 3 books, I guess.
I love the fact though that in this book and in the rest of the series, Rachel the dragon's still she's still around from time to time. She still crops up. We get the odd chapter from her, and she's changed too, but she's still like a formidable force. I love the fact that she's still there.
I think you would have to be to have done her job before everything goes bad. You've got a bunch of little snot kids like Simon who are supposed to be cleaning, and kids are not good at that.
Yeah, he's just can't be bothered. He'd rather be off daydreaming and dreaming about being a knight and all that kind of stuff. And he's just not. He's not doing it. Yeah, Faces he steps away from Tad William versions of Fellowship and becomes its own series for sure. Yeah. Everything starts to change. There are other people that are very, very different, I feel.
Yeah, and I think also like the scope of the change, because in a way, in Tolkien, those changes are pockets of change. In that, I guess, in a way that's very relatable, in that there's conflict in other parts of the world, and those separate from it aren't necessarily feeling the growing pains of that in the same way. Whereas, if I remember correctly, Tad definitely has like this really deep, tense feeling of. Although I guess the same could be said for Tolkien as well, because if Sauron succeeds, everything will change. Anyway, so maybe I'm just talking out of my butt, but you know what I mean, where it's just, I remember those books being so much heavier in a way that was hard to articulate at the time, where the adventurers are drawn from a wider net in the conflict.
Yeah, and we get a lot more points of view than perhaps I would say than you get in Lord of the Rings, because we get all these other bits and pieces. Like, I love Duke Isgramor, who's, you know, this huge old wolf, they call him, and he's this big beardy warrior, and then they make him shave off his beard and dress up like a monk, and he's like, no, and he has to go out looking for Princess Miramel. But we start to get more chapters and more stuff from her point of view in this book, where she's escaped and she's with her brother Cadrak, and then she, you know, they're on the run, and then they finally get to this this sort of city island state where she's then sort of captured by this other person who's actually there to help her. And it's all kind of like, she's basically bouncing like a pinball from one terrible thing to the next, and her constant companion is this drunk monk who's got lots of dark secrets of his own. But
and then she said that in the chat, it's a big divergence. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I wonder if that's kind of what I was trying to grasp at, where there's a separation in Tolkien's world between the good and the evil in a way that always, I liked it, but
no, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and so the writers like Williams, who are engaging in this complicated version of humanity where we're all capable of both, and I think that's how it feels like it's spread wider, because at any point anyone can choose the wrong thing, and it becomes more menacing and more like heavier and harder to see how they're going to survive this, when it's so much harder to see who the enemies are in his type of world building. And then again in Gimmel's type, this is going to be everybody please read David Gemmell with us. If you like Tad Williams, then so too.
But a lot shorter.
Yeah, the difference being all of Gemmell's books stand alone, I guess, with the exception of the Troy trilogy, until
you get to the Riganti, and then they start following.
Well, but even then I read them out of order, and you don't need to you don't need to follow it, because each story is self-contained. It has a very definitive beginning, middle, and end. But then when you read them all, you get to see all the overlapping lore that he did. But and they're shorter.
a lot shorter. Yeah, it's definitely more black and white. Like whenever people talk, fantasy authors talk about inspirations and foundations, yes, Tolkien is in there. He absolutely was for me. So was C.S. Lewis. So were a lot of these big authors that I read. Yeah, they're absolutely important. But I was thinking about this today. So I'm going to a convention in a couple of weeks, and one of the things I'm talking about is Andor. It is related. I'll come back to this, honestly, around the houses, but I will come back. And one of the things is, like, as a year-old man, Andor is the kind of Star Wars that I want and would love now. I think it's the best Star Wars for me at my age. But when I was a kid and a teen, the very kind of clear-cut black and white Darth Vader is a huge bloke in a black suit, essentially, with a red lightsaber, versus it's very clear-cut and it's very clean and it's very simple. But Andor is so complicated and grainy and layered, and it's just people making difficult decisions. And even some of the bad guys can be good things and can do good things. And it's the same with this. I feel that Tolkien is this, very important part of my foundation. But it wasn't until I was in my teens that I read Gemmell first. And then later I came to Williams, that I thought, Simon does heroic things. He didn't slay a dragon, but, he defended his friends using this magic sword and attacked a dragon. He fights ice giants in the second book. He rides around with, all these terrible, monsters and things that are going after. But they're all still very flawed people. Like Binnabic is a saint, but sometimes he just loses his shit with Simon. It's just like, will you stop complaining? People are dying. People are having, getting into trouble, and you're still whining. We didn't quite put it like that because he was a troll. He's so nice.
Perhaps that is part of his sainthood, though. That he's the one able to put Simon in line in an effective way. So who can blame him?
Yeah. She's right. We've built on it and we've changed, and the fantasy genre has massively evolved. Since then, it's just grown out of it. Like, you wouldn't have got Game of Thrones without Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. They've said this, and Sanderson cites this, and you mentioned Krystle Parolini before with the Aragorn. He cites this as well, and Rothfuss. They all cite this as one of the most influential ones, and it wasn't until Joe Abercrombie read Game of Thrones that he went, oh, you can do this with fantasy. So we wouldn't have got Abercrombie stuff without Game of Thrones. So we're kind of passing the baton on every time, I think.
It feels like fantasy very much as a genre is like, it goes by improv rules where everything is yes and, if that makes sense. Yes. Where Tolkien started the skit with elves and magic and the magic ring, and along the way Todd went, yes, and people are messy, right? And then Martin comes along and goes, yes, and look how messy they are. It's even worse than what Tad said. And so you get this like each person is dropping a stone in the genre, and we have all these ripples that are hitting each other, and it makes the genre so much fun just to watch, like the interaction of inspirations in this way. And so I don't know what my point was.
It's evolving. It's constantly evolving and moving forward. Heidi says the 5 Warrior Angel is a homage and a subversion of these books. I don't know what that is. Do you?
The
5
no,
Warrior
I'd have
Angels?
to know the author. I forgot the word for people who write.
Can you put the name of the author in the chat, Heidi? Because we only go from Google it whilst we're doing it. But I'm not familiar with it. But yes, you're saying New Installment is built on the back of what came before. Definitely, it really is. And Tolkien didn't invent fantasy. People think he did, but he's basing it on mythology, and that's from thousands of years of. Sorry, yes, Brian Lee Durfee's books. Sorry, of course, I do know Brian Lee Durfee. Oh, that's the 5 Warrior Angels. That's his greatest television show on the internet. He says about his YouTube channel. It's hilarious.
Oh, okay.
Yes, he's got some big. His books are huge, like chonker fantasy trilogy that he's done. I think they're immense door stoppers. But yes, fantasy evolved, and the other thing is that Williams looked at what Tolkien had done in terms of the sources for some of this stuff, and he went in a different direction. He said, well, he's pulling from Norse mythology or this and that. I'm going to go from a different direction and pull a totally different source. Like we talk about the elves, but in this book they're called the fairy folk.
And they're very that was the biggest impression on me from that series, is like the way he deals with elves and fae. Like, they're deeply unsettling in a way that is so impressive, because it's really hard to write non-human characters in a way that they don't feel human. And every time he does it, he absolutely nails it in that kind of way, where just like it's just uncomfortable, but like brilliantly so.
Like Binnabic isn't human. He's not just a short. He's not a hobbit who's basically just a short human, but likes to sit around all day, and drink and eat. He's not. You begin to understand the culture, not just where he lives, but everything that shaped him. He's not the same. And in more of Stone of Farewell, we get to see more of his culture. We get to see the hunter and the huntress who lead the clan. We get to see, the city, the way he lives, and his people and his fiance, and they get into massive trouble in this book. And part of the problems are caused by the trolls on their culture, kind of stopping them from going on because they don't understand. But equally, when Simon has met with the Scythi and Prince Juriki and stuff, they're the ones that are really creeping me out, because they're not human. they're not just humans with pointy ears. They're more like cat-like
exactly.
people. The more feline grace they have, and their eyes are weird, and they're not human. They're long-lived aliens, essentially. That's what he's done really well, I think.
Yeah, I always wonder if he has a little bit of background, or at least interest in horror, in the way that he's able to push you into unsettling, like a little bit of uncanny valley into the non-human. But that's entirely me speculating. Yeah.
Different world building cultures. They're not just humans in a slightly different city that feel a little bit different. They're radically different species, and you understand that they didn't come from the same source, that they're not just a slightly different type of human. I really like the fact that he did that. You feel it. And the other thing I'd forgotten about this book and all of the series, somehow this has completely skipped me by, that the dream road and dreaming plays such an important part of the story. And I'd forgotten so much of that after Simon's had this fight with the dragons, he's sort of, suffering from trauma a bit, and he keeps falling into a sleep and dreaming, and he keeps seeing things. And he keeps having visions of Dr. Morgen's when he dreams sometimes. And I'm never completely sure, and you're not supposed to be, I guess, if it's real or if it's just his imagination, because he talks to him and tells him things. And I'm like, is he still hanging around? Is a part of him still hanging around talking to Simon?
Yeah, and the fun thing about, books that dive into magic and spirituality is that it's possible, but also it's equally possible that this young man is a little bit losing his mind.
I think he's been through,
like this,
I wouldn't be surprised if he just completely lost it and just cracked and now under pressure.
Yeah, and I find that always interesting when writers are able to toe that line with the toll of these things, while also still writing the story of heroism and magic and inspiration. And like it's a difficult line, because one way, if you tip too far one way into the trauma, you end up being slapped as a Grunberg writer. But if you tip the other way, it kind of stands in between. At least for me, it stands in between my ability to immerse with this concept of these people being repeatedly traumatized by dragons.
The other thing I like, it's just said fantasy and Santi go hand in hand in that world. Which is fair,
It explains a lot about fantasy writers, doesn't it?
Yeah, they're all slightly little bit unhinged, I think. I think that's a fair assessment in general.
Yeah.
The other thing I like about this is, in this second book, King Elias kind of takes a little bit more of a back seat. He's still around the edges, and he's still a bit kind of off his head because the sword's corrupting and changing. But we see more of the Red Priest Pirates going out and about, and the fact that he's becoming less human as well. Like his power is growing. He asks for this thing and he's not supposed to get it, but they grant it to him, and his power changes. And I think it is in Stone of Farewell. I'm sure it is, because I'm now on the third book already. But spoilers for the third book. Richard the Dragon tries to kill him. She stabs him in the back with a knife and doesn't do anything. He just kind of goes, meh, and just kind of shrugs it off and keeps walking. But I think it's but he's grown so powerful. He's become something so weird. And another spoiler for this book, but we said there would be. He goes and kills the Arch Lector, the main Lector Ranasin, the leader of the church. Like, he's so secure and he's so confident that he'd be fine. And he meets with the priest, and then the priest kills everything. That's when Muriel then Cadrak knocks her out, and they has to flee because he knows that it's going to end badly. Even in the middle of the church thing, you're thinking it won't be that bad, and he is that dangerous.
He writes villains really well in that respect, in that once you're that deep into your own corruption, there becomes like the warlord despot type confidence, and then also just the ability to totally throw curveballs at the author or at the readers, lulling them into that false sense of security, but also saying, like, you and I both know that it's not going to go well, but I'm still going to surprise you with how bad it's about to be.
It's true. It's true. Heidi saying Wheel of Time's Dream Road. Yes. Jordan Wheel's contemporaries. Similar time.
Thorn was earlier.
Dragonbone Chair was 88. Wheel of Time was 1990. So.
Oh, really? I don't know why I thought Wheel of Time was older. And Dragonbone Chair was not as old.
Yeah, so that's a similar period ish, but then obviously the gaps between the Wheel of Time books got longer and longer after kind of every book. Because I remember that I was reading them when they were coming out, and it was a case of by the time the fifth one, I was like, I have to go back and do a reread all the way through again, and it was getting harder and harder every time a new one came out.
Oh yeah, I bet, because those are also doorstoppers.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. But what's this saying? Don Quixote reference.
Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe the thing about fantasy and insanity.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's right.
It does seem to happen. A lot of other things going. Yeah, I like the fact that he brought in. We had more stuff with the dream world. I like the fact that the character is a lot more grey and.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
It was actually
there you go.
Well spotted, Heidi.
Well done. Well done. Okay. Yes, it's just there's lots. He's adding lots and lots of layers to this that other fantasy books these days. Some of them have them, some don't. I think he doesn't explain things. Like there's no hard magic in this. It's very much soft magic, and I'm completely okay with that. I don't need to know everything. And the more I kind of talk to other people about magic systems, the more I'm falling more in the camp quite firmly of soft magic. Like I find hard magic a bit boring. What about you?
Yeah, I'm the same. At the worst for me, or at best for me, it makes it harder to remember what I'm supposed to know. Like if we're having a lesson plan that goes through the novel, then I can't keep track of it. Also with fantasy novels that require us to know, like, that have two characters in a room talking about the politics of other nations, and I'm expected to remember that as the plot rolls forward. It's not going to happen. And then also, to me, like if it's really well defined, to me, then it starts to become more scientific, even if we're talking about magic. And I feel like there's some really great stuff that exists in the middle ground. But if I wanted to read a how-to manual, I would have probably done better in school. But also I would have just gone and read that sort of stuff. And so for me, fantasy that's whimsical and just kind of shrugs and goes, yeah, just accept it. That's the fun. That's the most fun stuff. Even if it's whimsical and dark as hell. That's my happy place, where it's just like, yep, that's just the way it works. And also it feels really relatable to a lot of the time periods that these things exist in, where everyone was like, yeah, God's bowling, that's the way it works. It's thunder. What do you want? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like we don't need to know how the magic works in Lord of the Rings and Gandalf. There are limits. He can't do everything all the time. So it's not MacGuffin. But we don't need to understand the fundamentals of A plus B plus C makes a magic thing, because then it's just a scientific experiment. And
now that gets really
Well,
interesting when writers want to play with things like alchemy as magic, and like how that becomes a hurdle can still win me over, but generally it's not going to work for me.
Yeah, with Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin. Absolutely get it. I've got the special editions here. I had to get them. You can see them just there.
Oh, at the edge,
they're all kind of illustrated ones. They're beautiful.
Yeah, you can see the nice.
And I love that, because we don't really understand. We get bits and pieces, but that's enough. And Belgariad, yeah, David Eddings was another one that I read as a teen. I was slightly too young, but I read it. Now I'd consider it almost YA or middle grade. I'd say David Eddings these days. I would probably middle grade, actually, probably. But anyway, I loved that. And there again, we just get the basics. When you talk about dark magic, we don't need to know. I was thinking of Pete McLean's Priest of Lies, Priest of Bones. The magic in that, they're just called cunning folk. And we don't really understand the source of their power or where they're coming from. All we know is it's really, really, really dangerous and really damaging that when they use it. And like there's a kid called Billy that who was a war orphan essentially, and he sort of got PTSD as well, and he saw things that he shouldn't have as a boy. But when he uses his power, it just gets really, really dark. And this is a teenage boy doing it. And then he starts to look like he's got hollow, his eyes get more hollow. And it's like, what is it doing to him? We don't really know, but it's so disturbing.
I think that not knowing, to me at least, the not knowing adds to the stakes and the tension and the fear. Because like, if you don't know how badly it's messing with him, then like anything's possible for how this is going to go from him. And it's important for the author to know the limits and all of that, but we the readers do not need to know, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's my preference. Not really, only as much as that it's basically, so it's been described as Peaky Blinders kind of thing. It's that era, and it's not Victorian, it's not it's that, you know, they're not people corsets, but
post-industrial, post-industrial, and it's like it revolves around a crime syndicate, doesn't it? So it's like
him and his brother used to run a gang, and they go off to war, and when they come back, the town has been taken over by other people and other gangs, and they're fighting to reclaim their territory. And one of the people who comes back with them from the war is this war orphan called Billy, who's called cunning, and he just knows a little too much, and he can see things that people can't, and he can not exactly move things with his mind so much as make people explode with his mind. And some people think he's possessed by demons, some people think he's kind of, so that's the kind of the weirdness. We don't really know how it works, we don't want to know, and you shouldn't really get too close to Billy because it's quite scary and dangerous. So those are the only kind of horror elements, but otherwise no, it's not really a horror story. It's much more crime and very grim dark. It's that kind of thing. I like that kind of edge. Go on.
Speaking of war trauma and how it can flex in a fantasy novel.
And I did a lot of that stuff as well with the Coward, with PTSD and war sort of stuff. Heidi said she listened to Harlan Ellis narrating Earthsea. Wow, I didn't know he'd done that.
Oh, that's cool.
Good God, late great Harlan Ellison. Wow, that is fascinating. There's a new collection actually coming out of his Dangerous Visions books that the estate is getting done at the moment from Harlan Ellison, with a lot of new. And then they're doing a new collection with a bunch of modern authors doing stuff. So that's going to be an interesting book to watch out for the next few months. But anyway, totally not related to what we're talking about at all. That's okay.
We warned people that we were going to be a little bit more,
a little bit off. So one thing I did want to mention is that Prince Joshua, we see a bit more of him, and also his lover Voheza, her, and we get to find more about her family and the clan and the
fantasy naming problems.
Yeah, basically. But they go to they escape the woods and they go to the grasslands, and they meet her father, who's this awful guy who basically imprisons all of them in a horse run, and then he's trying to marry her off to someone else with Joshua there, and he has to fight this guy to the death, essentially, to get his own girlfriend back and stuff. And that's there again. We understand that these traveling people are not like stone dwellers. They call everybody else stone dwellers, and because those who live in cities.
Because they live in I remember really enjoying like the wider spread of the political problems that are all around this. Like everybody is against kind of everybody else in a way that felt really, it feels all too believable. I think
it's so amusing me now to look at the map that's so tiny, and like you think, oh, there's not much there, but he packs so much into every single little city and every single little island, and you're like, this is so radically different to what I've seen in other things where neighboring cities or nations are pretty much the same, the culture's the same, and then I start to think about it and look at Europe and I go, if you step over the border from Germany into France, they're nothing alike. The people, some of the countryside's probably similar in places, but they're so radically different, and he's done that. He's captured that brilliantly.
Well, I find it, interestingly, like just for a fantasy writer's perspective, there's the border between France and Germany, for example, where one side of the city they're both called Strasbourg, but on the French side it's spelled differently, and on the German side it's like just the way they use their vowels is different. And that the city is really gorgeous, but you can definitely feel the bleed of each culture either way. But also at the borders there's a lot more things that will overlap in the shared, because the food is more similar in that region, whereas if you go to Paris you're not getting the flams the same way, and so anyway, that's totally tangential now, but yeah, it is realistic for him to have put so much culture into such a small space, because certainly that is what we see in tightly populated pieces of the world.
But now, fancy maps now are just like so expansive and have so many nations on and so many different things. And then now I'm kind of like reassessing my next one, my own map, and thinking, how radically different.
What can I do?
But like, if they're neighboring nations, they could be so absolutely different to each other. They wouldn't. They don't need to be similar. And this is making me reassess things like that in my own work. Which, I hadn't thought about in a while.
Yeah, you get certain similarities, like what's available in trade, but even those things will be different depending on how they prioritize, the growing season or mining, whether or not they care about mining at all, or stone or timber. So there could be a lot.
I think that the best version I've seen someone do this, and it is fancy, it's not really, is The City in the City by China Mieville.
Oh yeah, I have that one on my I guess you can't see it from here, but it's on the shelf that's just out of frame.
He's done it so well. It is one of the best novels I've probably read ever. It's so clever and so well done, and the fact that it is the same city, but it's not just half a city and half a city. They cross over like all the way through. So you can step from one side of a street in one place and cross over to the other city. But the people in the two halves don't see each other. They've trained themselves not to see each other on the same street. I need to read
this book.
And it is so kind of clever. And then a policeman is investigating a crime and he has to go to the other city to cross over. And then suddenly he's on the other side now, looking back, but he can't look at his house. He's focusing on you start to realize how much it's not about the crime. It's all about all the things of prejudice and what divides us and what connects us. And it's genius. But then again, it's China. That's what you expect. Blokes are genius.
I'm going to have to read that clearly. And then I'll have to come to you.
It's not a big book at all. It's like 350 pages or something. It's one of his smallest books ever, Like Perdita Street Station is enormous. Perdita Street Station is
I didn't know that.
800 pages.
I guess I picked the right one to try him out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's when you get to the bigger ones.
I'll probably launch into the rest.
Read it on the plane coming over for Wilcon.
Yeah, there you go. I'll be ready. We'll be ready to talk about it over a few beers.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Perdita Street Station. Yes, the Broken Binding have just done a special of this, so I know this because we just got a copy of Perdita Street Station, and it is gorgeous. Chunky monkey though, like proper.
Is it for sale yet or not yet?
It's already gone, but maybe some. I don't know if copies are still available. You can
I'll have to go
You
check.
could have a check out, but yes, they did a copy.
Plug for Broken Binding.
Plug. It should be sponsored by Broken Binding at this point. Oh, the other culture thing I want to mention, going back to the book, is Princess Megwin, I think it is. So her father's killed. They escape to the caves, the tunnel system, and the kind of, all of their people are in there. And she keeps getting, this reminded me of the Earthsea books in one of them, where she's going deeper and deeper into the cave system. She's convinced that there's like a city down there that the Scythy used to have. And she eventually finds something and the massive gates and the doors, and she gets in with the prince. But it's not the Scythy that are down there. It's the kind of Dwaro or Devaro, what they're called.
Oh, yes.
And these are kind of the weird beings that served the Scythy, and they don't really like them anymore. And there's not many of them left, but they made the swords. And that's when you start to things start to come together. And I'm like,
yes, and the layers of the magic and like kind of how, I remember this now, especially because Faye talks about the caves giving her. I remember this feeling. And I'm not claustrophobic, but he writes it in a way that like it's very another one that's really threatening and menacing. And I'll forever remember how evocative his style is, in that he's able to impose so much emotion on us, the reader, even just from caves. And
you feel uncomfortable, you do. It gets under your skin. I'm not particularly claustrophobic, but I felt the impression of it. And the fact that when he's going down there and he's got his torch and he's trying to find the princess, she's been down there for days, and it's burning lower, and he's like, if this one goes out, what am I doing? It does go out, and then he's kind of scraping along, and it was just like he thinks he's going to fall into a pit and die, and no one ever find him. And I had to take a breather.
Hopefully it's some comfort to you, Faye, that we're not claustrophobic, but it was still deeply uncomfortable for us. Because I can't remember if there was something in the third book too, but I feel like it's a running theme with him of using space and the constraint of it to really put the pressure on us and also the characters, where it's kind of an inverse of the fantasy thing where the world is so big and sprawling, and that can be overwhelming, but then also he'll throw us underground once per book, and just kind of like
well, Simon went through it in the first book, remember, when he came to Hay-Hill, he's crumbling through the caves there and the tunnels underneath the Hay-Hill, and he finally gets out and he thinks, he's free. And then there's the kind of the nightmare,
and then it's bad
thing that he witnesses on the hill that scares him to half to death.
It's like he uses it as like a mile marker to go, to signal to us, and from here these people will be forever changed. It's like they're having to endure this small thing in order to burst upon the bigger things that are waiting for them in the plot.
It's just it's kind of trauma after trauma that they're all going through, Miramel and Megwin and all of the others, and just when they think they've got somewhere, more underground, more. People go through something even worse, and we think, they're fine, they've escaped now, and then there's something, whether it's ice giants or whether it's Paratis coming around and thinking Miramel finally thinks she's safe because she gets to the church and gets to have a bath and a wash for a change, and then they're on the run again when he comes in and kills everybody, and it's just like it doesn't get any worse. Or poor Tiamat, who's trying to get to this tavern, and on the way there he gets bitten by the crocodile, and then he finally makes it despite the infection, and the woman who owns it is dead, and her awful niece is now running it, and she puts him in the yard with this stupid old guy who's the mute because he can't really afford his route, and it's terrible. Like
he's such a good study of like an author asking themselves, now how can I make this worse?
It's the Peter Parker thing, Spider-Man thing. You never make him happy. People want to see him just constantly being tortured. And every time he gets a little bit happy, then we torture him again. And people are like, oh, it's so good. We're all just sadists. So
that's true. Yeah.
Something starts to go well, and then you worry, and then it goes wrong again.
It's a good skill though. Like, it's hard to pull off, because you run the risk of sliding down into like the nihilism of like, why are any of these people even trying? But he balances it really well, and also gives us enough to hope for and enough to root for, that in spite of knowing that he's about to make things worse, we're like, oh gosh. And then also he's good at doing things in a way that are unexpected, even though we know him well enough to know to not trust him and not trust the good moment. We know something bad's going to happen, but I do remember not being able to predict exactly how it was going to go bad, just that it's going to go down. It's not going to be good, but I don't know who's going to do it or how they're going to do it, which I really like. I think that's quite the skill, to balance that between, or falling too much into a predictable pattern that detracts rather than adds.
Yeah, because if it's just one bad thing after another with no respite and no hope and no faith, just as you said, if you're nihilistic and everything's just depressing, and it becomes grimdark. And I'd never call this series grimdark ever.
And you start to wonder, well, why don't these people just walk into the ocean? Just
stay in the caves, just stay down there. Why bother coming up? Why bother? It's like,
but he does have that balance of promise. Like he just, you feel that if they can survive this, there will be something for them, even if it's not what they wanted. It's very be careful what you wish for, especially at the beginning of Simon wanting the adventure and then oops.
True. Robin Hobb with Fitz, he's such a tortured character. We think he'll be okay, and then you're looking going, there's a lot more.
There's too much book. There's too much book left.
I'm slow walking my way through the series now, The Realm of the Eldings, because I don't want to get to the end. So I'm kind of, I'll read a book and then I'll wait like 4 or 5 months, and I'll read the next book and I'll wait 4 or 5 months, because when I got to the last one, that's it. I'm done. Although I can go and read like the Megan Lindholm books, but I'm slow walking through the Fitz books at the moment.
I had this specific experience reading Adrian Gibson's book Mushroom Blues, where I was in his DMs because there came to a point where the crime was solved ... And I'm like,
like, the book isn't over.
there's too much left. You're gonna hurt me real bad in about 10 to 20 pages, and I'm so scared because I really want this to be happy for the two characters, but there's too much book left and I don't like it. And then he made it so much worse and then so much better, and I love that feeling. I just, as a reader, I love that feeling of, oh no, this can't really be good. I've been reading Christopher Rocchio's Sun Eater books, and they're big books, and you get like 400 pages in and you think, oh, this is going terrible. Wait, this is going to get worse again. This is only book 2 and we got 7 books. This isn't going to end well, it's a good feeling. It's hard to nail. It's hard to get that right. So it's always really exciting when you're really invested in the writers that are doing it so well, like the one that we came here to talk about.
Yes. As Faye said, it's a sign of a great author. You want to keep going. I will admit, it took me a while to get back into Tad's style and his way, because yes, it is slow compared to modern standards of some books, but that's not a bad thing. People say that. I now kind of roll my eyes these days, because not every book has to be pace. And a 700 book can't be relentless at the same pace. There has to be peaks and troughs.
And I don't understand that as a criticism, because personally, because if I'm really enjoying the work, why not have more of it? You know, why not linger in the world building and the characters? And because I like it here, and I don't necessarily want it to rush through important things just to get to the ending faster, you know. And that's why I like miniseries better than movies, for example, just because they have that time to breathe. And Tad has that style of just setting things down for us and letting us live in it. And I find it just, if the voice works for you, it just levels up the investment so well, of like, I really want them to be okay. And I you know, I'm just so interested in learning about all of the peripheral things that could be okay, if only. And then how he gets us there is the journey. It's not the end, you know. So
yeah, and there's a lot, you know. The third book, which I've started reading, is so big they split it into two, you know. And he's done it again on the new series. It's a trilogy in 4 books again.
I don't know why they bother contracting him for 3
I don't know why. They're just like, really? Come on, he's going to do it again. I'm so curious now that I'm, you know, 3 books in of this 4-book series, and I have read some of the stuff in between. I'm curious to see how his style has evolved and changed in the 30 years since he wrote this to the present. Like, is his pace, is the way, I mean, he still talks the way he writes, and he writes the way he talks, but has he picked up any of the stuff from the last 30 years of the fantasy genre? And has he naturally evolved his own style, or has he picked up things that we'll be able to identify in the new series? I'm very curious about.
That will be really interesting to see. I didn't realize that the first one was that old. For some reason,
not that old. What are you saying? What are you saying, young lady?
I'm saying we're the same age, is what I'm saying.
We absolutely are.
No, I meant me in the book.
Wait, you were born in 1988?
Yeah. And for some reason, I always thought of Jordan's books as older and, like, I don't know, more. I don't know. And then Tad just had it felt like a fresher voice, but I've been disabused of that.
You've been
that
outed.
Notion.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah, that too.
So now we can know how old you are. Okay.
Yeah.
I was already.
I am 1 Dragonbone chair years old.
Basically, yeah. I am not. I'm a little bit older. Yes. But yeah, I want to see how his style evolved. I want to see revisiting the world, revisiting some of the characters, and where he's going to go with the story. Haven't dug into this one. There's lots of places he could, but he won't. If this was a mirror of Lord of the Rings, if it was Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, what on earth is the new series going to be a mirror for in his own way, evolved beyond? Like, what could it possibly be? Yeah,
it'll be interesting if it's a conversation with himself and his work, or if it's a conversation with other pieces of the genre.
The genre, yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be fascinating. I haven't seen him talk about that aspect of the series. Maybe he wants to wait until it's done as a whole before we can have those conversations, some time to pass, so we can talk about some spoilers. But
yeah, that makes sense, because if he talks too much about what changes, then it kills the curiosity for folks like you who are wanting to compare. Yeah.
I'm very conscious of all of the people's shoulders that I'm standing on to build, my work. I know that it's like Gemmell and David Eddings and James Barclay and Jordan and Williams and Robin Hobb and all these sort of Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. I know I can cite them all. They're all there, but I don't know. I wonder how I've been influenced by people in the last 20 years. That's changed me.
I feel like I'm super aware of it.
So who's impacted you recently then? Like, last 10, 15 years? What are you conscious of that's affecting you?
So I think the reason I'm specifically aware of it is because I took the break that I did from fantasy. So my big backstory is that when David Gemmell died, I didn't read fantasy anymore for nearly 10 years. Just because, oh gosh, I couldn't find anyone who replaced him, because you can't. And I bounced really hard off of, what I considered my dad's fantasy, like Robert Jordan and all of those same contemporaries. So I went into thrillers, specifically Dennis Lehane and his social circle. And then I came back into fantasy, and I could see how fantasy had changed, and how the focuses have changed on culture. And I find that for me is an ongoing conversation that I'm having with my own genre that I do love very much, where an older style of fantasy very much wanted cultures to be a monolith. So, there was like cardboard cutouts of each, be it a fantasy race or just fantasy cultures. Whereas now there's a lot more conversation about the differences that we have within cultures and how those things, how we interact with ourselves, as well as how we interact with the other, in a way that is really compelling to me. So that's to say, I came back in with Anthony Ryan's work. He was like my first I Miss Fantasy. But then after him, I read, A City of Brass by Shannon
Chakraborty.
Yeah, she was so good. Like, she changed the trajectory of where I was going to go, I think, just with her influences and the way she talked about, somebody figuring out who they are within their own cultural touchstones. Who else? You put me on the spot now. I do think non-fantasy also is a big influence on me. I'm just trying to look at my shelves. Other genres are still such a huge influence in the way that they talk about a lot of the same things, like how do we exist within our own selves, never mind how we exist on the world stage. And I find that to be, but Tad did that too. Like, even though I obviously lump him in with my dad's fantasy just because of when it was published, he was really good at his cultures being vastly different from each other, but also individually not a monolith. Oh no.
You're haunting people. Your books are haunting people.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not sorry. I'm really not sorry.
Not sorry. Not sorry.
Yeah, so I just feel like I the shoulders that I stand on are across a lot of different genres. But I hope it always becomes a love letter to fantasy specifically, because it really did. It turned me into the reader that I am and the writer that I am. And I'll always be here. I can't write anything else. I've tried, but I don't like it.
I've done other things, and like other influences, non-fantasy ones. Well, like there's Stephen King and Dean Koontz thrillers. I love Dean Koontz.
Yeah.
He has written some turkeys, in my opinion, but the vast majority of books that I've read have been, the core idea of some of his books are brilliant.
Yeah, when you get that many, I feel like a couple of turkeys are allowed, so, but I'm always, anytime somebody asks me what books I like, I immediately forget every book.
No, it's fine. But then there's things like H.P. Lovecraft that was an influence on me, and Anne Rice even. Like I
Oh,
grew up
yes.
reading the vampire,
Oh,
the
yeah.
stat books, all of those books. And
I don't know why I keep forgetting about her books, but yeah, I devoured those as a young person.
I think I love the mythology. I'm not a horror reader. That's the weird thing, really. I don't read.
I don't
know.
think I knew they were horror when I was reading them. And maybe that says a lot about me not being horrified. But yeah, I remember specifically The Tale of the Body Snatcher. I think I read that book about 20 times.
Wow.
Just because it's such a, yeah, I mean, with a when you're skipping school all the time, you have a lot of time to read. But it's such an internal book in a way that was different from the rest of her books, because Lestat was grappling with himself and who he even wanted to be in that same way that I'm really drawn to. So that was a good one. I remember my poor mother taking me on like road trips up into Northern Ontario, which is gorgeous. And she just really wanted me to enjoy the road trip, but I was hunched over The Tale of the Body Snatcher because I needed to find out what happened.
Yeah.
I think, so Faye said they're gothic, but I think gothic and horror have a lot of overlap in a way that it's hard to extricate them from each other.
Yeah. There's I think I love the mythology. I think I love the history.
Yeah.
I'm not a big history buff, weirdly, but seeing it through the lens of someone who's supposed to have been there and hearing them talk about it, I like
seeing
that
it through the lens of character writers will always sell me. Like I have read and or watched things about periods of history that never once crossed my radar, but it's focused on the characters in such a way that it doesn't even matter where it's taking place, that it's just, it gets me.
Yeah. Certainly that I can cite a lot of influences outside the fantasy genre as well as within over the years, but I do wonder who in the last 10-15 years that I've been reading has kind of soaked in somewhere, and I'm not really conscious of it. It's something I'd have to think about a lot, but there's always a book every now and then that comes in that's just so difficult and so different sometimes, and difficult to read. Though it can be both. It can be just kind of like, it makes you sit back and be like, I was not expecting that. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, I find like my spite reads the books that I wanted to be more are just as much of an influence as the ones that I really loved, where it's like I had such different expectations of where this was going to go, and the writer in me can't necessarily fault this book for being what it is, because it belongs to its writer. It's not mine. But now I want to write my version of this where it goes the way I wanted it to go. So that probably also says a lot about me and various children.
Could do my own version, make it right.
Right.
Is what you're saying. That's basically what you're telling me.
Yeah, it probably equal measure. Now, again, I can't think of any offhand, and I don't think I have the courage to put anyone on blast like that. But
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, we strayed again, but then again, we're still talking around writing and inspiration, and I'm assume if we asked Tad Williams what his inspirations were, he could cite a bunch of people that that directly influenced his work, that he's standing on their shoulders, that shaped him within the genre and outside. I'm sure there's a lot of people, but I've talked about it with someone else today. I sometimes feel a little guilty that I have reading gaps within the genre, but then again, there's so much time and there's so many books. Like, I'm not someone who won't go back and read a book that's older. Like, some people won't go back like past 10, 15 years, 20 years. I'll happily go back and read a great book from 60s, 70s, but there's a lot of those books I just didn't grow up reading. They weren't as easily accessible in the library, and so I haven't read like Roger Zelazny. I hear the name all the time. I just haven't gone back. Gene Wolfe, I've now bought Book of the New Sun there to go back and read, because Rocchio keeps going on about it all the time. I'm like, all right, I've got it now. I'm going to read it. Will you stop talking about it, please? So I'm going to read it. But like, there's some of them I'm just like, I haven't got round to them yet, and I feel like I should. But then, you know,
I feel the same way, especially about the stuff that came up in the gap, where I wasn't reading it. So around the time, I guess through the 2000s. But even like, if I think back now, even when I was reading David Gemmell, I can't say that I was necessarily reading a lot of other fantasy. I guess depending on how you classify fantasy, like, is Anne Rice fantasy because it's vampire? Anyway, that's a whole different. But yeah, I missed a lot of stuff that people are talking about now as being not all that old, but still very influential on them. Like Scott Lynch is one that I have them. I have every intention of getting around to them maybe one day.
You can read the first book as a standalone, and it's one of my. I think it's one of the best written fantasy books of the last 30 years.
Yeah, I hear that.
It's Charles Dickens. It's a crime caper. It's funny. It's dark. It flashes back to when he's a child. Yeah. It's Oliver Twist. You can see he's borrowed a lot of stuff and based things and influenced by, clearly.
Yeah.
But whenever you hear him speak in an interview, the guy is just so erudite and so well spoken that you can understand that this kid, because he was 25, 26 or something, something like that.
How insulting.
And he's just that bright, and he's just that good, which is another reason I hate Rocchio, because he's just that young and just that bright. He's a little bit older, insulting, but not by much. Yeah. But he's exceptionally talented and very, very clever. But so this, that's the second and third books. Make your own mind up, but that first book, I think, is just spectacular.
I'll have to try.
Another one for the plane.
Yeah. How long are you going to be on the plane?
Yeah, as you well.
That one's pretty. My husband read them. He loves them. We went through a span of time where I was not reading very much, but Kareem was, and so I would buy him all the books that were like popular in my social circle and go read them. Tell me what you think about them, so that I can pretend I know what they're talking about. And he really loved those, so I feel like I should get around to them. But
because I remember when the 10th anniversary editions came out for The Blade itself, Eliza Locke Lamora, and Tom Lloyd, Stormcaller. They're all 2006, I think. I think it's all kind of 2006, 2007. So they all had like 10th anniversary editions pretty much around the same time. And then you start thinking about it and you go, hang on, does that mean The Blade itself is now nearly coming up to 20 years time?
Oh, that's uncomfortable. Right. Yeah.
2007, Blade itself. No, hang on. No, that's not right. That's not right. Hang on. I'm Googling it as fast as I can. Joe Abercrombie, 2006. No, I was right. Yeah, 2006. So that was the same year. Those three books came out the same year.
And then so that was also, it happened to be the same year that I was out. I was like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. Although I read, I guess he's not fantasy. He's historical fiction, but Conn Golden. Oh god, I hope I said his name right. I've collected along the way all of these writers that, like, if you open up their books and say I really love David Gemmell, I'll buy the book. And so he was the one that I read kind of as I was running out of David Gemmell novels, I think, but before he passed away, or at least before the news reached me that he'd passed away. There we go.
One of his contemporaries and friends is James Barclay.
Okay.
Who is I'm happy enough that I can call him a friend. Actually, he was an influence and inspiration for me, and he gave me a cover quote on The Coward, which was, and he said it reminded me of Gemmell, So basically, I was done at that point. I'm like,
plateau, retirement.
I'm all right. That's it. I peaked now. That's it.
Where do you go from
downhill
there?
now? It's all downhill now.
That's why you jumped into historical
fantasy. I'm like, I just changed now. Do something different. Yeah. But yeah. Okay. Right. We're kind of strayed far from the path.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether we'll come back next month or wait another month and just do both books together of the last one. I don't know. I will discuss it depending on storms.
We should try to have Faye and Shauna on. Shauna, possible, I think.
Yeah.
Let Faye have her chance of redemption, and then
maybe we'll do that. We'll message offline and stuff and sort it out. But what? Get out!
This is real pain that came out of your chest on that one.
It's my birthday tomorrow, and this is just hurting me. So
you're not allowed to pick on him like that on the eve of his birthday.
It's just wrong. Right. We'll either be back next month or the month after, and we'll discuss all of the wrapping up of the series with hopefully more people. And then I'll see some of you in August at Wilcom.
I'm very much looking forward to that. I have a lot of books to read before that.
Me too. Yeah. I've got a lot to get through before then, but we can manage it. Right. Okay. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this. We've had a lot of fun, and we'll see you all next time.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks for having me on.
Bye.